welcome to Community Shield, a program brought to you by the Houston Police Department, the first program of its kind in the entire nation. Yes, police officers, we set up the interviews, we put it all together, and we do the interviewing. You know how it usually works where we have a TV anchor interviewing the officer? No, this is the police officers interviewing the guests. So you're going to see a real nice perspective. Now, this program is going to be really cool, so I want you to stick around. Today, we're closing Domestic Violence Month, which was the month of October. I know we're already in November, but this is really cool. This event called Celebrating Survivors' Victim Voices. It was an amazing program where we were able to hear the stories of 2 victim survivors. Yes. And I had the opportunity to learn a whole lot from these victim survivors. One of them is Tammy Rodriguez. She's a community activist, and she does most of her work in the Southwest. Now, I didn't know there was reasons behind the work that she does. And with this, I learned why she does what she does and why she does it so well, because it comes from the heart, del corazón. And we're also going to hear another story from our friend Ramya Varanasi. She also has an amazing story. It's a different culture, a different way of looking at things that I was even aware of. So stick around. This is domestic violence, a program for you. And of course, we're going to be highlighting survivors. So stay here, and you're going to hear a lot more. This is just the first part of Community Shield of the Houston Police Department. No te vayas, don't go anywhere.
We want to bring a voice to them in this public forum. And Tammy Rodriguez is 60. Yes, please, un aplauso por favor para ellos. Tammy Rodriguez, she's a friend of mine. Ella es una mujer, she's a 61 year, should I say that? 61 years of age. She's more like 24 years old now. She's a wife of 32 years, mother of 3 amazing women, and grandmother of a beautiful, beautiful grandson. She is a survivor of domestic violence. She retired from the multi-family industry of 35 years. President of the Golden Citizens Advisory Council, where she is a full-time activist for a very well-deserved assignment, the abused and the needy. Community that is underserved. Her organization is the bridge between HPD and community. She has always been about empowering residents and with knowledge of their rights as a renter, cater to the needs of community with resources and services available to them, empowering victims of domestic violence to make a change by reporting, following through, resettling, and safe environment, and become self-sufficient. La señorita Tammy Rodriguez. Now, for those in Spanish, la señorita Tammy es una mujer muy joven de 61 años de edad. Ella es esposa de más de 32 años de casada. Es madre de 3 niñas preciosas. Es abuelita, abuelita de un niño muy fabuloso. Ella es una sobreviviente de violencia doméstica. Ella se retiró de su trabajo de más de 35 años, pero ahí no quedó, sino que ahora es presidenta del área del Golden Citizens Advisory Council, o sea que ella es la patrona en esa área. Ella hace mucho trabajo para las víctimas que se mantienen en silencio, para los que son abusados, para los necesitados. Ella representa a su comunidad que no es servida apropiadamente. Su organización es un puente y un nexo entre la policía de Houston y la comunidad. Ella también le gusta empoderar a los residentes de la zona y de toda la ciudad de Houston, dándoles el conocimiento, la sapiencia a los renteros de sus derechos para ayudar a aquellos que necesitan ayuda con recursos. Ella se los pone así como en charola de oro. Ella los empodera a las víctimas de violencia doméstica y les ayuda a hacer el reporte, el primer paso, y los ayuda a darle seguimiento, y a las familias que necesitan moverse, salirse de donde están, ella los acompaña de la mano y los hace que sean autosuficientes, la señorita Tammy, ¿ok? And now, lastly, but of course, just as important, because she is also a survivor and she's here to empower the entire community, ella es Ramya Varanasi, okay? Ramya, yes, give it up for Ramya. Ramya Varanasi is an immigrant from India She completed her master's in management information systems from the University of Houston. She is currently working as a software developer in a tech company. She comes from the simple middle-class Orthodox Indian family, moved to the United States almost a decade ago to fulfill her quest for traveling and explore the technology world and add some value to it. She is a survivor of domestic violence and still continues to fight her battle with her abuser. She has a baby boy and is almost 3 years old. As an immigrant and a survivor, Ramya feels responsible in educating other women who are physically, mentally, emotionally, and physically, and most importantly, abused over immigration and gender and by the U.S. citizens or permanent resident partner. She got the opportunity to work with the Huffington Post. An article about survivors was published out on her story. Ramya's wish is that at least a few girls out there learn about VAWA Act or understand that the United States have always to support immigrants who are domestic violence victims, and it is okay to come out of such abuse relations. Ella es la señorita Ramya. Un aplauso para ella. All right, so we got a couple of questions that we have prepared. Hemos preparado preguntas para nuestros panelistas y nos va a ayudar la señorita Mary.
Well, first of all, let me start by just thanking these
Just a little closer.
thanking these two ladies who sit on either side of me. I had the pleasure this weekend of speaking to both of them for some significant time to prepare for this. And what I can say is that though we are gathered today during Domestic Violence Awareness Month, it doesn't just happen and stop in October.
La señorita María dice que tuvo una junta con las muchachas, con ellas dos, estuvieron platicando sobre lo que van a hablar el día de hoy y nos damos cuenta que esto no se detiene solamente en el mes de octubre, esto es algo que sucede todo el año.
So we bring two guests to share their voices and their experiences with us today with the hope that you in the audience take back their experiences with you, and we continue to work for survivors through the rest of the year, not just in October.
So hemos traído a estas dos personas que han optado para estar con nosotros y ofrecer sus historias para aprender de esto y recordar que esto no es solamente algo temporal en el mes de octubre, sino que es algo de todo el año.
So thank you to Ramya and thank you to Tammy. So we're going to start with Tammy Rodriguez. You had her introduction. We do have some formal questions, and we'll just kind of take it from those questions and see where we go, okay? All right. So Tammy, when did you first realize that you were in a domestic violence or an abusive relationship?
Once let me start a little bit and try not to elaborate too much. I was 14 years old when I met my boyfriend. Married at 16. During those 4 years until the age of 20, I did not realize that I was in that type of a relationship until the isolation began, the controlling behavior, and the sexual abuse.
Dice la señorita que ella hasta los 20 años empezó a dar cuenta de que estaba en una situación mala, cuando empezó el aislamiento, cuando empezó el abuso a los 20 años.
So Tammy, when you and I talked, one of the things that you mentioned to me, I'm sorry, I can't quite get this microphone right. One of the things that you mentioned to me is that the reason you did not immediately recognize the situation you were in was because of your upbringing. Can you share some of that with us?
Yes, well, I mean, I was raised in a violent type of atmosphere. My father was very abusive to my mother. I was the last one in home and did not realize that, it was a day-to-day battle for my mother. We dreaded the weekends, and it was really physically, emotionally, verbal, abusive. So as a young teenager that decided to graduate and marry 20 days after I graduated, I didn't know any better. I thought that was a way of life, and that was the duty of a woman, to be a wife and to accept what was given to me.
La pregunta fue para encontrar desde la raíz, arrancar esto de la raíz. ¿Desde cuándo, cómo te convirtiste como de una manera que no pudiste detectar esta maldad, esto que estaba en tu vida para reconocerlo como una maldad? La señorita Tammy responde que ella lo vio desde un comienzo, desde el comienzo de su vida, desde su niñez. Ella miró cómo su padre abusaba de su madre físicamente, la golpeaba y ella pensaba que esa era la manera de vivir, esa era la posición de la mujer, aguantar al marido hasta más no poder.
And Tammy, you mentioned that it was about 4 years into your relationship when you realized you were in a domestic violence or abusive relationship.
Dice que lo que duró 4 años en su matrimonio para darse cuenta que había abuso en su matrimonio.
Well, the first signs is when he told my mother that I would continue to college after graduation. He started being, would not let me go through and continue my career. He started stalking me at work and I didn't know. And he confronted my co-workers, male co-workers, without my knowledge. I found out later that he was jealousy and I was losing my job because of his actions and did not know.
Lo que dice la señorita Tammy, que ella se dio cuenta cuando estaba yendo a la escuela que empezó él a aislarla. El aislamiento es algo que es muy prevalente en las relaciones de violencia doméstica. El aislamiento fue la primer fase y indicación de que algo estaba muy mal y esto comenzó 4 años en su matrimonio.
Were there signs, Tammy, after you were able to get out of the relationship that you feel that you might have missed or ignored at the time?
¿Hubieron señales que de repente te perdiste?
Yeah, I was like, I wind up realizing that, the signs of the sexual abuse could not have been normal. I did not witness that part with my parents, so I didn't know that part. So like I said, you need to have that, things were off. So that was the first sign.
Were you able to get out of that relationship eventually?
Yes, I wind up getting pregnant. I wind up getting pregnant and I decided to stay in the relationship. I apologize. This is the first time I am speaking of this out loud.
Can we please give her a hand?
Esta es la primera vez que ella habla de este tema y se hace muy difícil para ella hablar sobre esto.
I was pregnant and I again thought, well, I'm going to have to stay in the relationship because I'm pregnant, going to have a child. Well, after my daughter Desiree was born, I chose to make a difference by making her life more important than mine. On my second week after having her, the sexual abuse became intolerable to where I said, I can't do this anymore. And it was like, I don't know if a mother's instinct, but my mother called and said, if you want to get out of this, I'm there for you. Just let me know.
Dice que ella se dio cuenta. Dice que ella se dio cuenta que era tiempo de empezar a buscar su salida con el embarazo y el nacimiento de su criatura, que fue cuando empezó a pensar más en su criatura que en ella misma y en la confusión en la que estaba, porque los asaltos y el abuso sexual continuaba subiendo a grados más fuertes. Entonces aquí es donde ella supo que algo estaba muy mal.
Once I called my mother 2 weeks after she was born, and this month, 41 years ago today, I left him. I told my mother that I had enough, and she said, okay. Not even 30 minutes. I had my brothers there with their trucks backed up. They packed me up, and I never turned back.
El apoyo que ella encontró fue en su madre. Su madre le dijo, si estás lista, hija, para venirte conmigo, vente conmigo. Nosotros estamos dispuestos a recibirte a ti y a tu criatura. Y sus hermanos, en cuanto ella dijo, estoy lista, sus hermanos inmediatamente llegaron a su casa y con camionetas listos para sacarla de la vida que estaba viviendo.
You mentioned your family. When you called and asked for help, they were there. Were there other resources at the time that you found valuable when you made the decision to leave?
Mencionaste tu familia cuando estabas ya dispuesta a salirte de la situación en la que estabas. ¿Había algún otros recursos para ti disponibles?
The answer to that, I refer back to my daughter. There was back then, there was no resources. It was either, you know what, you got yourself into that, let's see, how you get it out. And that's basically why women stayed quiet, because at that time it was a civil matter, not anything that we have today. But at that time, my daughter at 5 months had a stroke. I went blind for about 5 minutes, but she was determined to be born. So if she had the strength to continue, then I could. I was not going to let her down, and she was my resource to make that move.
Dice ella que su recurso principal para salirse de esa relación abusiva fue su hija. Su hija a los meses después tuvo un ataque en cerebro, un stroke, y lo cual estaba en una situación muy grave, pero como su hija chiquita decidió pelear por su vida, su mamá también decidió pelear por la vida de ellas y decidió salirse de esa relación. Su hija era el recurso que ella necesitaba para salir de esa relación.
She saved my life that day.
Ella me salvó la vida.
Is she with us today?
Yes. Desiree, can you stand up?
Su hija sí está presente.
Thank you, ma'am.
So Tammy, what's the one piece of advice that you would give to someone who finds themselves in an abusive relationship and doesn't want to report it or doesn't think it's the right time to report?
I wrote about this and I'm saying not to be afraid to make that change. If you're strong enough to withstand an abusive relationship, you're able to withstand anything. And with the resources that you have now and day, so much help out there, you're not alone. You can ask for help. And, I wish I would utilize even Crime Stoppers. If you want to be anonymous and turn yourself in, I mean, anything that you need to do to either save your life or to save that of your children, that is the advice that I give you.
Dice ella que el mejor consejo que puede dar es que usted tiene la fuerza para salirse de la vida en la que está. Ahorita, si tuvo el valor y la fuerza de soportar el abuso con esa relación, que también tiene la fuerza y el valor para salirse de esa relación. Si usted pudo soportar tanto abuso, utilice los recursos como ahora, como Crime Stoppers, y puede entregarse usted anónimamente para que vengan por usted. Es lo que dice la señorita Tammy. La cosa es salirse de esa relación con vida.
Stop the cycle. Stop the cycle. Because if you take the abuse, your daughters will as well. And your sons will become abusers. So stop the cycle.
Hay que detener ese ciclo, porque si yo, como ella dice, si yo fui abusada, entonces mi hija también va a pagar el precio y va a ser abusada también conmigo. Detengan el ciclo, no más este ciclo, a detenerlo ya.
Okay, Tammy, the last question. You talked about resources, and you've talked about your journey. I want you to share, if you would, with the crowd how your journey has influenced the work that you do and tell them about the type of work and the resources that you provide back to survivors of domestic violence.
What I did for myself, I see other women stronger than me. Over the years in the apartment industry, I was able to see and witness the signs of an abused relationship or abused person. At that time, I chose, I was a supervisor over 6 properties in Gulfton. And when I saw that they did not want to report anything or just get away from that situation, I gave them the opportunity to transfer to another property within my portfolio in order for them to escape that. I have been privileged to see these ladies, now women and grandmothers, survive and they're alive. And so now with the nonprofit that we have, which I took it in, when there's someone else in the audience that I would love to recognize. And with GCAC, we were able to take that nonprofit a little bit further than what it's supposed to be for HPD. And we take personal doing fundraisers, raising money. And then what we do is that if somebody comes into our storefront and reports an abused relationship, or vice versa, comes through one of our services that we have there, we try to help them. They make the report, they come through the door, they don't go back out, and we take care of them. Maria Chavez, can you please stand?
María Chávez.
She is our agent. She is the one that does family consulting and advising, and a shoulder to cry on, a counselor, everything, you name it. PhD, it doesn't not describe anything that she is. And with her, our women are okay. And so I think that what we did is that we actually made a program called DVR, which is Domestic Violence Resettlement, and within the Gulfton Citizens Advisory Council. And Maria came up with a charla, which is a just for us to have a meeting to empower women to come forward. And I think we came up with the idea of, I have bukus of jewelry that I needed to get rid of. So we thought that the abuser, if they said they were coming to a jewelry show or something, they could come and speak without having to worry about where they were at or whether they could come. So they went back home with sets of jewelry, so the guy or the abuser thought, wow, they just went to, like a Tupperware party type
Wow.
deal, not knowing that we were empowering them to lead them.
Increíble la historia. La pregunta fue, con el conocimiento, lo que tú pasaste en tu vida, ¿cómo lo aplicaste en la vida para ayudar a otras personas? Ella dice que era encargada de unos apartamentos en el Southwest, y cuando ella se daba cuenta del abuso que había, abuso doméstico de las familias ahí, ella era proactiva y iba detrás de las familias y ella ayudaba a la víctima a salirse de esos departamentos y las acomodaba en otro complejo de departamentos de los cuales ella tenía también control. Entonces ella los reubicaba, ella no se esperaba que vinieran a pedirle ayuda, ella iba y les sugería la ayuda. Y de ahí fue que nació otros movimientos y se hizo esta organización sin fines de lucro que ahora se maneja directamente en el Southwest, y vienen víctimas a pedir ayuda, a pedir recursos, y reciben ayuda de todo tipo. Con los recursos que ellos reciben, ellos le dan acogimiento a las víctimas, y salió una idea de que cuando venían las víctimas a pedir ayuda, ellos les daban un regalito, una prendita, algo para que se llevaran, y cuando regresaban a casa, el marido o la persona que victimizaba pensaba que la persona había salido a hacer una comprita, comprarse una joyita o algo así, y así disimulaban el asunto mientras que ellos estaban preparando el plan para que esa persona saliera de ahí. Eso merece un aplauso bien fuerte, la verdad.
By the way, it was called, Maria named it Precious Jewels, joyas preciosas.
Joyas preciosas, como usted, ¿verdad?
Para todos.
All right, so we're going to transition now to Ramya and ask her a series of similar questions. And what I think you'll find is Ramya has a very similar story, but she brings it to us today from a different background, from an immigrant background, which I think is will be very telling in some of her answers. So, you ready?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, Ramya, when did you first realize that you were in a domestic violence or abusive situation?
¿Cuándo te diste cuenta que estabas en una situación abusiva?
Hello everybody. Like Mary well said, as a survivor, my story is something similar to any other survivor here, but with a little, twists and turns here and there. So my journey with my soon-to-be ex started maybe through a matrimonial site. And I hardly know this man, so I have married complete stranger. This is how Indian Orthodox marriages happen.
¿Es arranged? ¿Was it arranged?
Yes.
Okay. Dice ella que su historia es muy similar a la que estamos escuchando ahorita, pero tiene unas variaciones. La relación y la tradición de ellos es de que a ellos les hacen matrimonios arreglados. O sea que ella no tiene la posibilidad de escoger con quién se va a casar. Entonces eso es una dinámica muy diferente. Ella no lo conocía absolutamente nada.
So I just met this man directly for my wedding, a week before my wedding. So after I got married, slowly I started seeing a change in him, or rather I say see his true colors, where he was trying to have his control over every possible area, financially, emotionally, mentally, physically, and most importantly on through the immigration front.
Dice ella que en cuanto se casó con él, empezó a haber cambios inmediatos en su matrimonio. Él empezó a tomar control de sus finanzas, trató de tener control de sus emociones, de todo aspecto de su vida personal, y también de
Immigration.
y la condición de migración, sus documentos migratorios y todo eso. Él trató de tener control de su situación migratoria.
And Ramya, can you tell us, the audience, your status at the time that you were married?
¿Cuál era tu estatus migratorio?
So when I met this man, I was on my student visa and I had a perfect job going on, which I just graduated and got a job.
Acababa de recibir su visa estudiantil y acababa de tener un trabajo.
And you mentioned that one of the types of control that he used against you was the immigration or the status. Can you talk to us about that and how that affected your relationship?
Y una de las maneras que trató de controlar era tu posición, tu situación migratoria. ¿Cómo lo hizo?
So he was in a rush. Less than a month after my wedding, he was in a rush to, change my status from a student to a permanent resident. Now, what is the rush for is a student visa needs continuous working, I need to work in order to maintain my student visa. But if I'm a permanent resident, the clause of compulsion of working will go away. So his first step was to remove that compulsion, so I will financially start being dependent on him, which was definitely not essential because I had a valid status back then.
Entonces lo que ella tenía era una visa estudiantil. Lo que logra hacer esta visa es que ella se tiene que mantener haciendo proyectos, trabajando, haciendo cosas por sí sola y continuando siendo independiente, pero él quería inmediatamente hacerla más como residente, y quitándole ese estatus que ella tenía, le quitaba la obligación de mantenerse activa como trabajando como estudiante, y entonces le daba total control a él de su estatus, de decirle: ya eres residente, no tienes que trabajar, no tienes que mantener esa categoría de trabajo en ti, ahora puedes dejar todo eso.
So the immigration documentation requires your 7 years of history. So that means this man had a straight, easy path to know my 7 years of history, where I lived, what I did, everything, my travel itinerary, everything.
Entonces él tomó posesión de todos sus récords y archivos por 7 años. supo de todo lo que ella tenía, todo lo que ella hacía, o sea, él se compenetró en todo lo de ella, en toda su vida, dándole pues un paso más adelantado a ella en lo que él estaba pensando hacer.
I started saying that I was losing myself. My identity was changed, my last name was changed, my compulsion to work, my passion to work was, slowly coming to an end, because he was insisting me that, once the PR documentation was done, he started forcing me to quit my job.
Entonces ella sintió que su identidad estaba comprometida, no le estaba quitando su identidad ya como persona, ya no la dejaba hacer lo que ella le gustaba hacer, ya le estaba quitando ese estatus que ella tenía y ahora estaba básicamente a manos de él.
So Ramya, during the periods of isolation and control, were you also going through physical abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse, kind of what we see across the spectrum of types of abuse in domestic violence relationships?
Empezamos a ver todo tipo de abuso en ti, todas las diferentes clasificaciones, abuso físico, abuso mental, abuso económico, todas las clasificaciones estaban en tu estatus de abuso con él.
Like each dish has a separate recipe, each abuser has his own way of, showing his, what is a control or power. So my man is completely different from every other person. What I mean by that is, I'm newly married to this man, and the first and very odd control that he started doing is the bed relation. We never slept in a bed or in a room, which was completely strange for a newly married woman. So this continued maybe for several months before I moved to Houston, and finally I got pregnant with just one or two intimate movements. So that was really, really disturbing for me, and I didn't know who to share and how to share what I was going through back then.
Dice ella que su relación con este hombre era muy particular. Después de que se casó con él, su matrimonio no fue consumado, o sea, no hubieron ningún tipo de relaciones, ella dormía en su lugar, él dormía en otro lugar, y esto sucedió por mucho tiempo, muchísimo tiempo, hasta que después de conocerse como matrimonio, entonces que vino el embarazo.
And the physical abuse started when he realized that I got pregnant, which is completely strange. Usually men at least excuse when the woman is pregnant, but I haven't seen that. I started to face family abuse. My in-laws started abusing me, and he was encouraging doing all these things. I was abused right after my child's birth, which is like a nightmare even today. I cannot forget that particular moment where I had to struggle for maybe 48 hours to give birth, and right after my son was born, maybe 1 or 2 hours, I was, harassed mentally. The labor ward was echoing with the loud screams, yellings, my cryings, my baby cryings, and I still can't forget that moment, that.
Dice que durante su concepción fue cuando empezó el abuso, cuando se dio cuenta el marido de que ella estaba embarazada, fue cuando las cosas empeoraron. Dice que usualmente ella esperaría que un embarazo fuera recibido de una manera positiva por su marido, pero de ahí el volumen en la violencia y en el abuso se duplicó, y no nomás era él lo que abusaba de ella físicamente, sino que también se agregó al platillo los suegros. También los suegros empezaron a tirarle malas palabras y abuso verbal, gritos y abusos de todo tipo, algo que ella jamás esperaba. Su casa se convirtió en un grito y de abuso por parte de los suegros y de su marido, que no se comparaba ni con el llorido de su propia criatura.
So, Ramya, I'm sorry. How long did you stay in the abusive relationship, and when and why did you make the decision to leave?
¿Cuánto duraste en esta relación abusiva y cuándo decidiste dejar finalmente este matrimonio?
So I stayed in the relation for 2.5 years, and I must say I'm still in that abusive relationship. So it has been 4 years now. because I'm still fighting against that man. And for a woman, I think we can sustain, even if the man is hard on us, be it physical, mental, every aspect he chooses to abuse us. But when it comes to the kids, I don't think we cannot take it when you start realizing that this man is trying to harass or hurt your baby. So I had this situation where when he was hurting me physically, it hit him. It hit my baby boy who was 15 months back then, and I really couldn't take that, to see, because I thought he would at least step back when he realized that he hurt the baby instead of me. But he was so busy doing what he was doing, and my son was hurt along with me. So that's the first moment that I think I should, it is the high time that I start realizing and take a step. But still I was, like I just thought being with the man would give a better life for my son, so I was just holding back some more time. But after a month, I got to realize that I was pregnant second time. It was a rape, and I was not ready for this, second child to face whatever my first son is, going through. So that's when the day I realized, I took this stage that this is it. I can't continue this relation because my son is getting affected. He is starting to get hurt by his dad. So that's when I realized.
Dice que desde que comenzó su matrimonio con este hombre, a los 2 años y medio decidió comenzar el proceso de salirse de esta relación. Desgraciadamente, todavía continúa en esta pelea, y lo lleva ya a 4 años con esta relación. Pero lo que finalmente la motivó a ella de dejar esta relación fue el hecho de que ya tenía a su hijo en sus brazos. Y a los 15 meses de su criatura, de su edad, este hombre, mientras la golpeaba a ella, también le alcanzó a herir o golpear a esta criatura. Y fue cuando salió la mamá oso, ¿no? La mamá dice, ya no más, esto va a terminar ya. Desgraciadamente, ella había, un mes después de que estaba en este camino, el hombre abusó de ella sexualmente, abusó de ella, y ahora quedó embarazada con su segundo embarazo. Ella no esperaba esto porque ya estaba sufriendo bastante con su primer criatura y el abuso de este hombre, y ahora iba con su segundo embarazo y su segunda criatura, y definitivamente para ella era no más.
So last question for you. When you and I spoke, one of the things that you really talked to me about was your status as an immigrant at the time and the things that you didn't know. Your rights, your resources as an immigrant, right? So what resources do you wish that you had before all of this happened, when you came to the country, when you married your husband?
Dice que en su estatus de migratorio ella no conocía de todos sus derechos en aquellos tiempos. Y la pregunta fue, ¿qué te hubiera gustado haber conocido antes de todo esto? ¿Cómo te podías haber defendido con los recursos que había? ¿Qué hubieras querido haber sabido en el momento que entraste en este problema de este matrimonio?
I would say, know your rights. Every individual, every immigrant has certain rights, and that is your part. So first know your part, and then you will know how and when to use that part. So I lacked this knowledge of basic rights that I as an immigrant had back then. So I was really scared to dial 911 and share my story and cry for help, because I was scared. Maybe I would be detained if I cannot prove my point against a citizen here. So I had so many questions back then. So first, I think if I have to come through US by student visa, we have to give a TOEFL or GRE exam, which is very essential for us to have a proper communication here when we land here. I think we should have some basic rights questionnaire also, that every individual, be it men or women, they have to go through those particular rights as immigrants when you're coming to a new country, because we don't know what is right, what is wrong, and always the immigrants have this fear that, what if I do something, that can just detain me back to India. So this threat we always carry with ourselves. So I think it would be nice if we can have that power and know the rights.
Dice ella que lo que hubiera querido saber y le pudo haber ayudado es si ella conocía sus derechos como migrante. Dice que el hecho de no conocer sus derechos le daba miedo llamar a la policía y le daba miedo el pensar de que su historia o lo que ella tenía que decir no era suficiente para darle la ayuda que ella necesitaba y que en vez le iba a resultar negativo e iba a ser llevada o deportada al país de India. Ella hubiera querido que cuando llegó a este país que se le hubiera leído una cartilla de información sobre sus derechos como persona y como migrante, y así eso podría ayudar a muchas personas perder el miedo de llamar a la policía y pedir la ayuda en el momento que se necesita.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gracias.
So
Un
please,
aplauso para ella, por
yes.
favor.
So what did you think about that? Ramya, Tommy, their stories, it's just, they tug at your heart. I hope you got something out of this story. It's about survival. And not only that, you heard it from them, that out of the negativity, something positive can come. So if you have a story, something that has held you down, turn that around and make that the thing that puts you up and just sets you apart. Those are gifts that are given to you to be able to battle and to be able to overcome, to become who you're called to be.
All right? The resources are here. And we're going to talk about the resources and exactly what happens. ¿Qué es lo que pasa cuando haces un reporte a la policía? And for that, let me quickly introduce our panelists. We have from the Houston Police Department, Mrs. Julie Pleasant with us. Bienvenida. Yes. She's from the Houston Police Department Victim Services Division. Julie Pleasant is a native-born Houstonian, fourth-generation peace officer, and 25-year veteran de la Policía de Houston. She is currently serving as a lieutenant in the Victim Services Division. During her tenure, she has overseen the unit's growth, a staff from 6 advocates to a staff of 50. Am I reading this right? 52? 52 advocates. My goodness. Okay. All right. Here we go. 52 advocates, police officers, supervisors, and administrative staff to achieve divisional status. She is also a founding member of the Domestic Abuse Response Team, also known, aka DART, and is responsible for ensuring DART field teams delivered trauma-informed care to crime victims. La señorita Lieutenant Pleasant is she's active in the Harris County Sexual Abuse Response Team. She is the Houston Area Council on Human Trafficking, Houston Collective Healing Project Team, and Human Trafficking Rescue Alliance. All right, here we go. Vámonos con la teniente, la señorita Julie Pleasant.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. So we're going to pick it up from the very beginning. So whether it's you or someone, a loved one or a neighbor, someone calls 911. But the other option that you have now is you can also text. So 911 now receives text. If you can't speak, you don't want to speak, you don't want to let them know that you're calling 911, you can text 911. Or you can call 911 in open line if there's some type of abuse going on. We get that a lot. We get a lot of detail that way also because our dispatchers are then typing those details into the call slip so that when our officers arrive, they have that information typed into the call slip. So after that happens, the first officers to arrive, and because domestic violence is so dangerous, because it's so emotional and triggering for both sides, we send 2-man units, right? It's a 2-man or woman person unit. That can be 2 different cars, or we can have a 2-person unit just arrive. So they're going to arrive on a scene, both for Harris County and HPD. That's pretty standard. And then depending on if it's with a weapon, we may have a couple more. We may have a supervisor actually tag along. So we have enough resources to control whatever is going on. The next thing that's going to happen is if it's an aggravated assault, serious bodily injury, or continuous family violence, the primary officers, which are going to take care of all the law enforcement stuff. So the suspect, the arrest, report, and charges is going to be handled by those first two officers that are arriving on that scene. The second unit that's called is either going to be DART or SMART. DART is Domestic Abuse Response Team for Houston, and SMART is going to be the Sheriff's Mobile Assault Response Team. Yee-hoo! Okay, so HPD and Harris County, so they're going to arrive. They're secondary. They're partnered with a victim advocate or counselor and an officer. So both trauma informed, both have specialized training, both de-escalate the scene, and both focus only on the victim's needs. Needs and safety resources evaluation will be done, and we'll find out if it's safe for that victim to stay. Of course, it's their choice whether or not they want to stay or go, but we can help facilitate getting that person emergency shelter. If there's going to be referral resources, which will be, I don't need emergency shelter, but I think I'm going to need, I might need skills training because I don't have any skills. I have been controlled and I haven't been able to acquire any skills. I didn't even get to finish school. I don't get to go to the grocery store. Our partners who we collaborate with, nonprofit partners, have the skills training. They have in-house daycare, they have in-house schools. So kind of a different holistic approach in Houston, Harris County for victims and survivors of domestic violence. So you'll be offered those resources now with the program on the scene. Between the heightened hours of domestic violence for us is going to be 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. and that's just because of statistics. Now, once that unit arrives and does a needs and safety assessment, the DART or SMART unit is either going to get the emergency shelter, assist with transportation, and so on. If there's an arrest on scene, there's kind of a cooperative roles and responsibilities. Arrest on scene and a felony arrest is going to be handed over to the DA's office so that the victim advocates there can follow up. If there's a suspect that is not arrested or they leave the scene, then what we're going to do as victim advocates for HPD and also with Harris County, we'll follow up on those different victims who fall outside of that 7 to 3 on-scene arrival, okay? So 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. on-scene arrival, but any other time we'll have day shift victims calling and following up on those calls. It's really important that you know when you have an advocate, they're going to talk to you about crime victims' rights. They're going to tell you what those are, as well as the DA's office. With DART, there's going to be evidence-based prosecution. DA Ox spoke to that a little bit because of the forensic nurses that do the domestic violence forensic exams. That's touch DNA. So he said that she strangled him, and she said that no, he strangled me. So now that touch DNA evidence will take the burden of proof off that victim's back and put it squarely on the shoulders of the evidence to prove that case. And Harris County District Attorney's Office does an amazing job of making sure that we can use that evidence-based prosecution on behalf of the victims. We also have the needs and safety assessments and then the crime victims compensation. So all the advocates across, whether it's county or the DA's office or the city, we're gonna make sure that victims know that they have entitlements to funding to pay for medical bills, etc., crime scene cleanup, a lot of different things that just our victims just are not aware of. The next thing is going to be the investigator follow-up. follow-up, and a lot of victims sometimes think that I'm done. I told the first officer there that I wanted to press charges. But if an investigator is calling back, it's because there's additional information needed, and they need to cooperate with that and get back to the investigator so that we can push through on the charges. Or sometimes there's victims that recant, so we can pull back and let the DA's office know that they may have changed their mind. But either way, just to collaborate so our partners know what we're going to do with the case. Another really important part is you may be asked, as an immigrant victim of violent crime, there's a U visa process. So if you're cooperating with law enforcement through the fruition of the investigation, that option is available. And a lot of people don't know that. They're not aware of that. And then the most important part is to stay engaged, whether it's with us, or if your case is now in prosecution, to stay engaged. Any changes with your phone number, any changes with the address, that's super, super important. Lastly, I think all of us here want to make sure that everybody is aware that you don't have to suffer in silence. This is about how to outcry, how to get 911, how to get law enforcement. You may not want us. Maybe you just want justice and to get out. We have a hotline number. It's 713-528-2121. Those are our partners. That's who we call when we need emergency shelter. They have hotline coordinators that are always there, hotline helpline. Please reach out to someone.
Good evening. My name again is Vanessa Gosen. I'm one of the prosecutors in the Protective Order Division, and I just want to touch briefly into what a protective order is, the process for obtaining a protective order, and how this resource is offered by the Harris County District Attorney's Office. Free. It's a free service that we are offering to victims of domestic abuse, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking. And again, as my partners here on the panel, immigration status is never an issue, and we all want you to reach out to us. Our office wants to support you and help you through this process. So what is a protective order? A protective order is a civil order that a judge will grant that prohibits the respondent, the abuser, from committing certain things, or doing certain things, excuse me. And those things could be having absolutely no contact, committing further acts of family violence, going to your home, work, and or your children's school. And protective order also prohibits the respondent from owning or possessing a firearm for the length of the protective order. So that also reduces, right, the likelihood of future harm, of extremely dangerous future harm. So there's different bases, obviously, for applying for a protective order, as I stated. There are obviously the general is the domestic violence basis, and that requires some sort of relationship, either an intimate relationship, a sibling relationship, either through marriage, consanguinity. Even roommates can apply for protective orders. But there are other protective orders that don't require a relationship, and those protective orders are based on sexual assault, stalking, and or human trafficking. So you may think, I don't qualify, I'm not in a relationship with this person, but he sexually assaulted me, or he's stalking me. Please reach out to our office, and I'm going to talk about what that process looks like. You can always contact our office at 713-274-0212. We are fully trained both in English and Spanish. 6 out of 10 of our caseworkers are Spanish speakers, but we also work with language lines to provide other services if you do not speak English. Please do not feel alone. The process begins with you also coming, either calling or coming directly to our office. We are now located at 1200 Congress in the Juvenile Justice Center on the 2nd floor of that building. If you go there, you would fill out an application and be seen by one of our caseworkers. The interview takes approximately 2 hours. At this interview, we would want you to bring any photographs, any videos, any incident report numbers that you may have, anything that you feel is important to obtain this protective order to help us. And if you don't, that's okay. Now, after this interview, the caseworker will prepare a declaration based on the statements that you make to him or her about the incidents of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking. And you will sign that declaration, and then it gets turned over to a prosecutor. That prosecutor will review your declaration, any evidence that you may have, and then at that point makes a determination to file your case. The prosecutor also can make a determination on whether to file your case to ask for a period longer than 2 years if there's been any conduct that constitutes a felony, even if he hasn't been charged with the felony, right, or stalking or sexual assault. So the protective order could be granted for a period longer than 2 years. We just need to have the basis for it, and the prosecutor would make that determination. Now, after filing the case, drafting the pleadings and filing the case, it would be set for a hearing before a district court judge. Now, that hearing requires that we personally serve the respondent, the abuser. So we understand this may be the first time after leaving that abusive relationship that you may have to be and confront the respondent, the abuser. So our prosecutors, our caseworkers help prepare you with that understanding that you have suffered trauma. So we help you prepare with going through your declaration. We help you talk about the questions that you could be asked, what cross-examination looks like. The respondent is going to have to be personally served, so we would need to have an address to serve him at. And that may include serving him in court if he has a criminal court date coming up. Now, after that court hearing, you obviously attend that court hearing, and right now it's still being conducted via Zoom, which gives the applicants, the survivors of this abuse, great strength to go forward with these protective orders because they are being conducted via Zoom. But the prosecutor is always there every step of the way. Your caseworker is always there every step of the way. And at the conclusion, whether it's a default because the respondent failed to show, or an agreement because we were able to resolve the protective order with an agreement, or a trial in which we had to push forward and the abuser contested the protective order, we hope to give you or obtain a protective order by the judge. Then that protective order gets filed with the law enforcement agencies, and when there's violations, all the applicant or the survivor of that domestic violence needs to do is pick up the phone and contact police, right? He's outside of my home. That alone, within 200 feet of her home, or work, or school, that would be a violation of the protective order. And so it's an instrumental tool that our office provides this resource to applicants. We want to be able to help you, empower you, becoming a survivor.
I hope you enjoyed this program, a collaborative effort from the Houston Police Department, the Sheriff's Office, Ed Gonzalez, and of course the DA's office, putting it all together. And of course the glue that put it all, the ONDA magazine. Thank you so much, al Señor Gabriel, for helping make this event come true. I hope you got a lot of information out of this program. We also want to thank Julie Pleasant. She represents our domestic violence unit and our special victims. So thank you so much, Julie, for always saying yes and coming to the programs and just putting all your knowledge out there. I hope you're the best on everything that you're doing. And also our friends from the District Attorney's Office for being a wealth of information and for always collaborating with your brothers and sisters here in Blue, the Houston Police Department. And Harris County Sheriff's Office, you guys rock and roll. Hope you enjoyed the program. I hope you can share it. And of course, let's grow from this, and let's not stay quiet. If you see domestic abuse, you see family violence, let's get these people some help. Let's bring them to the resources. We have them here. If you have any questions regarding this program, you can always call us at 713-308-3200. That is the line for Community Affairs of the Houston Police Department. Again, your friend Jesus Robles. May you have an awesome week, and we'll see you next Wednesday at 3 o'clock.